Hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, I'm Sam Sachs, here to play some tracks off my latest album titled, Now That's What I Call News. The ruling class is already settling nicely into Trump 2.0. The Dow Jones Industrial Average surged 1,500 points in trading on Wednesday, the biggest daily jump since 2022. Major gainers include one of Trump's biggest financial backers, Elon Musk. Tesla's stock shot up almost 12%. I guess that's because since Trump won, the company doesn't have to worry about Musk's legal exposure related to his get out the vote efforts in battleground states. I honestly don't know why else it's shooting up. Bank stocks also climbed higher, anticipating a Trump administration that will deregulate Wall Street. JP Morgan went up 11%, Bank of America 6%, Citi 9%, Wells Fargo jumped 13%, Goldman Sachs, 12%, Morgan Stanley, 13%. This is like that feeling you get at a casino when you're losing playing blackjack, but at the table next to you, everyone is winning and high-fiving and having a blast. Trust me, been there. It sucks. Anyway, the most disturbing signal coming from the market emanates from the private prison sector. The top two for-profit incarceration companies, Geo Group and CoreCivic, saw huge gains. Geo Group share prices bounced up 42%, and CoreCivic saw an increase of 29%. That's the ruling class telling everyone that not only are they ready to allow Trump's mass deportation operation, they want to profit off it. Finally, speaking of elites benefiting from Trump's win, no one does so more than Trump himself. His victory granted him not just the White House, but also a get-out-of-jail-free card. It was reported that special counsel Jack Smith is now looking to wind down the multiple legal cases against Trump in order to comply with DOJ guidelines that a sitting president cannot be prosecuted. Cases pertain to Trump's mishandling of classified information and his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Other countries have managed to establish systems in which the law is applied equally to average people as well as powerful politicians. But here in the US, once you become president, you're untouchable. This week, Democrats watched as the coalition the party had cobbled together to win the popular vote in every presidential election going back 20 years just dissolved away. Working class voters, minorities, young people all fled the party, leading to Tuesday's catastrophic defeat and the possibility that Democrats may wander the political wilderness for some time. That is, unless they can diagnose the problem and course correct. So far, though, the explanations coming out of the campaign and party leadership don't inspire confidence. Harris campaign chair Jen O'Malley Dillon wrote a letter to staff offering her take on the loss. She claimed, quote, "You built a first-rate historic presidential campaign in basically 90 days. You stared down unprecedented headwinds and obstacles that were largely out of your control. We knew this would be a margin of error race, and it was. And your work mattered. The whole country moved to the right, but compared to the rest of the country, the battleground states saw the least amount of movement in his direction." Okay, so the message being, we did nothing wrong. In fact, we did everything right. This was just a freak election that we probably weren't going to win anyway. Former President Barack Obama had a similar analysis. He said in a statement that Harris and Walz ran a remarkable campaign, but, quote, conditions have created headwinds for Democratic incumbents around the world, and last night showed that America is not immune. Wow. Okay, so the problem doesn't rest with Democrats or even the United States. This is a global phenomenon that's holding back the party. Nothing we can do, I guess, but just hope conditions improve for the next election? The issue with this analysis is it doesn't reflect what actually happened in the 2024 contest. Jen O'Malley Dillon can claim that the whole country moved to the right, but in reality, Trump is going to end up with fewer votes this election than he got in 2020, a race he lost. So how do you win this time around? Well, it's because Kamala Harris is on track to get more than 10 million votes fewer than Joe Biden. 10 million. Good luck finding another election in modern U.S. history where a candidate received that many fewer votes 4 years later. You won't. So voters didn't shift right to Trump. Again, he's not getting any more votes than he got in 2020. They just stayed home instead of voting for Harris. And if Democrats truly want to understand why that is, then they're going to have to listen to people who aren't actually Democrats, but are still invested in the success of the party. One being independent Senator Bernie Sanders, who released this statement after Tuesday's loss, placing the blame squarely on leadership in the Democratic Party who've forgotten about class politics. Quote, "It should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned working class people would find that the working class has abandoned them. First, it was the white working class, and now it is Latino and Black workers as well. While the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and want change, and they're right." Sanders added that he's not confident the party can change course. Quote, "Will the big money interests and well-paid consultants who control the Democratic Party learn any real lessons from this disastrous campaign? Will they understand the pain and political alienation that tens of millions of Americans are experiencing? Do they have any ideas as to how we can take on the increasingly powerful oligarchy, which has so much economic and political power? Probably not," he concluded. I agree, though I have to admit Bernie is part of the problem here. He built up a pretty effective political machine to pressure Democrats and then just squandered it all to remain in the party's good graces by endorsing Joe Biden and campaigning for Kamala Harris. At the end of the day, he's been a reliable party man. Hey, but there's still time to be part of a solution, Bernie. Another diagnosis of the Democrats' problems came in from labor. Jimmy Williams, the general president of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, posted a Twitter thread based on interactions with his working class members, and he reached the same conclusions as Sanders. Quote, "The Democratic Party has continued to fail to prioritize a strong working class message that addressed issues that really matter to workers. The party did not make a positive case for why workers should vote for them, only that they were not Donald Trump. That's not good enough anymore. Rather than offer a positive agenda on what immigrant workers bring to our country, they bought into the punitive, tough, anti-worker messaging that is championed by Trump, even though we know it's the boss's fault. They failed to address inflation, saying that it wasn't a big issue, or that the pain that working people feel right now isn't real. So while we were able to get many of our members out to vote for Vice President Harris, many other workers went with Trump." Unfortunately, the party will be hesitant to pursue a working class agenda that in any way might harm wealthier voters who now comprise the Democrats' donor base. But there's a lot of evidence to support what Sanders and Williams are saying here. Just take a look at what happened in deep red Nebraska, where Kamala Harris lost to Donald Trump by 22 points. But in the state's Senate race, Republican Deb Fischer found herself locked in an unusually tight contest against independent Dan Osborne, a former union president who centered his campaign on working class populism. Osborne still lost the race, but only by 8 points, performing far, far better in the state than the vice president did. The biggest opponents to this approach will obviously be the Democrats' consulting industrial complex, but they aren't actually interested in winning elections as much as securing their own livelihoods, jumping from one failed race to the next. One final note here. Most autopsies on the Harris campaign will ignore the role the genocide in Gaza played, mainly because exit polls showed it wasn't a big concern for voters. Although the exit polls won't really capture voters' concerns about Gaza since, well, those who were concerned just stayed home and didn't participate in exit polls. But it can't be denied that in the months leading up to the election, polling showed that Harris could improve her standing in battleground states by supporting an arms embargo on Israel to end the genocide. According to the Institute for Middle East Understanding, 34% of likely Democratic and independent voters said they would be more likely to support a candidate in favor of withholding weapons to Israel. And the Harris campaign opted to ignore this information. But the Trump campaign did not, even though Trump supports the genocide just as enthusiastically as Harris, if not more so. Check out this bit of reporting from the Times on Trump voter targeting data. Quote, the Trump campaign's research found that up-for-grab voters were about 6 times as likely as other battleground state voters to be motivated by their views on Israel's war in Gaza. Point being, they were gettable votes. Harris just didn't want to get them. So yes, there are a lot of reasons for Democrats' loss. First and foremost, the party's abandonment of the working class going back decades. But for the sake of posterity at least, it also has to be repeated that Harris campaigned on supporting a genocide, not ending it, and she paid the political price for it. We're now on to day 4 of the New York Times Tech Guild workers' strike. Picket continues outside the paper's offices in New York City, and readers are still asked to respect the digital picket line by not playing any of the Times games like Wordle or by using the Times cooking app. Although if you really want to play the dang games, the striking tech workers created their own versions to help you scratch that itch. And if you're desperate for some recipes, the strikers also provided some of those too for readers, including we've got beef with management stuffed mushrooms, strike beans and rice, and solidarity soup. Sounds good. Solidarity soup doesn't have any dairy though, right? The strike is persisting despite dozens of members of the Guild reportedly crossing the picket line to do work on Election Day. According to Business Insider, some were on work visas, had concerns about job security, or were just flat out anti-union. Still, hundreds of other members of the Guild have respected the picket, and a GoFundMe set up to support the striking workers has raised over $131,000. If need be, they're in it for the long haul. For this week in working class history, we rewind back to 1933 in the town of Austin, Minnesota, site of the Hormel Meatpacker strike. The company tried to impose a new insurance program that reduced workers' wages by 20 cents a week, which at the time was a lot. The plant employees had been organizing for months and, fed up with being ignored, confronted management demanding fair wages and union recognition. Jay Hormel himself didn't agree to the demands, so the workers strengthened their negotiating hand by holding a strike authorization vote. It passed easily, but before the strike threat could be delivered to Hormel, a group of workers prematurely just went on strike. And it was on. At first, the picket was quiet, with hundreds of workers complying with Hormel's wishes to make it a friendly strike. But as soon as word got round that scab work was being done inside the plant, a few dozen workers joined together and stormed the facility, physically confronting and dragging out scabs and foremen, and even confronting Hormel himself and forcibly removing him from the plant too, commencing the first ever sit-down strike in recorded U.S. labor history. After 3 days of occupation, the governor of Minnesota traveled to Austin to mediate an end to the standoff, and ultimately workers got their wage increases and ended the strike. Hormel got so freaked out about the power of his workers when organized that he preemptively made other concessions through what he called the master plan that included further pay increases and new benefits. Sounds nice, but of course he had ulterior motives, which were to undermine more radical labor action at the plant. And it worked. The master plan ushered in decades of labor peace at Hormel. Thanks to the team at Working Class History for giving us access to their archives. Follow them on social media at Working Class History, where you can learn more about this story and other events that happened this week, including the 1948 Newark brewery strike, the start of the anti-communist Palmer raids in 1919, and the 1912 debut of IWW comic strip character Mr. Block. We'll be back with more next week. Okay, friends, the show ends today with a sunrise from somewhere in Connecticut. It was sent in by Wendy. Enjoy. Thank you, Wendy. Show's over. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please sign up for Means TV, subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels, and follow us on social media. One day capitalism will fall. Until then, we're going to be right here. See you tomorrow.